What would you do if you were standing at the door, travel bag in hand, ready to finally leave, and someone said something that stopped your entire life in its tracks? Not a threat, not a warning, just a sentence. One calm, quiet, completely unexpected sentence that rearranged everything you thought you knew about your future. Most of us have had a moment like that. A moment where time seems to pause, where the ground beneath you shifts just slightly, and where you suddenly realize that the version of yourself who walked into this situation is not going to be the same version walking out. It might be something small that triggers it. A look, a phone call, a conversation you never saw coming. And in that one frozen second, you understand that your life has just taken a turn you didn't plan for. Now imagine that moment happening not on Earth, not in any familiar place, but in the gleaming, crystalline docking bay of an alien palace, in a world so far from home that even the clocks don't make sense. Imagine you are a man who has spent his career delivering messages and staying out of trouble, a man whose entire professional identity is built around smooth exits and clean departures, a man who had already said goodbye, twice. And then the door opens again, and everything changes. This is the story of Marcus, a man who came to deliver a message and instead became part of one. A story about unexpected responsibility, about choosing to stay when leaving would have been so much easier, and about what it truly means to step into a future you never planned, and decide, slowly and honestly, that maybe it is exactly where you were supposed to be all along. Stay with me, because this one is going to stay with you. And if you are watching this for the very first time, welcome. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story like this one. We share new stories every week, and our community is full of people who love exactly this kind of deep, emotional storytelling. Hit that subscribe button and join us. You will not regret it. Now, let us begin. Marcus had already said goodbye twice. In his professional opinion, that was one goodbye too many for a job that mostly involved delivering sealed messages and politely pretending not to hear things that were clearly not meant for human ears. He was good at that, the polite pretending part. It was practically a skill listed on his resume. Stay quiet, look. Neutral, leave on time. He had been doing exactly that, leaving on time. Finally, after days of careful formality and the kind of diplomatic politeness that made your face tired, he had collected his things, offered his respectful farewells, and made his way to the docking bay. He had said goodbye once. Then, because someone had stopped him at the corridor with one more ceremonial courtesy, he had said it again. And now, finally, the ship was right there. The ramp was ready. The systems were humming. The third farewell was already forming on his lips, ready to be delivered with practiced warmth, when the docking bay door slid open behind him. It opened with a soft, dramatic hiss, the kind of sound that suggested whoever was entering was either very important or very inconvenient, possibly both. Marcus did not turn around immediately. Experience had taught him that sudden movements in alien palaces tended to trigger one of two responses. Either the palace security system went into a low-level alert, or someone nearby began playing ceremonial music. He preferred to avoid both. So he stood still, keeping his posture relaxed, and waited. But the silence that followed was different from the usual respectful quiet of an attended space. It was a different kind of silence entirely. It was the kind of silence that speaks directly to your instincts. The kind that makes something deep inside you whisper very quietly, "You are not leaving today." Marcus exhaled slowly, then he turned. Queen Valia stood at the entrance of the docking bay. She did not need to announce herself. Her presence simply was, it filled the space the way a clear thought fills a quiet mind. She stood tall and composed, her long, elegant ears angled just slightly back, catching the warm glow of the crystalline overhead lights. She looked at first glance strikingly human, and then, as always, you noticed the details, the precise quality of her features, the absolute stillness of her posture. The way her gaze seemed to take in not just what was visible, but everything surrounding it. Marcus offered a polite nod, the kind of nod that said, with great respect, "I acknowledge your authority, and I also have a flight to catch." "Your Majesty," he said, shaping his most practiced smile, "I was just about to leave." "Yes," she replied, her voice calm and even, "I know." "That was the plan," Marcus said. "A genuinely revolutionary concept, I realize." Something shifted in her expression, not quite amusement, but close enough to it that Marcus felt, if only briefly, slightly less doomed. "Marcus," she said, stepping further into the bay and with the subtlest of gestures, dismissing the attendants who had followed her inside. The door sealed shut behind them with a soft, decisive sound. The bay was suddenly very, very private. That was when Marcus' internal alarms began to sound. Not the loud, urgent kind of alarm, more like a quiet, persistent chime. The kind that says, gently but clearly, this conversation is about to change your day in a significant way. Yes, he asked, careful to keep his voice perfectly steady. Valia stopped a few steps from him. Her gaze was direct, unhurried. Are you aware, she began, her tone almost conversational, that you left me pregnant? Marcus blinked. In his experience, and he had a fair amount of it, there were many sentences one could hear at the conclusion of a diplomatic mission. Safe travels. We appreciate your service. Please consider not returning. These were all sentences he had heard before, some of them multiple times. This was not one of them. I'm sorry, Marcus said, after a pause that lasted approximately one lifetime. It seemed like the safest possible response. I think my translator just attempted to resign. It is functioning correctly, Valia replied. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Right, he said. Good, that's good to know. The silence that followed was thick and deeply uncomfortable in the particular way that only completely unexpected truths can create. Marcus searched his memory with increasing urgency, flipping rapidly through weeks of protocol meetings, formal gatherings, carefully neutral interactions, until his thoughts crashed directly into one very specific memory. The festival. Bright lights strung between tall structures he had no name for. Music that didn't follow any rhythm he recognized, but somehow made you want to move anyway. A drink that had tasted like citrus and, he now understood, extremely poor decisions. And Valia, not distant, not formal, not the queen, but a woman laughing freely among her people, her composure set aside for one rare evening. And Marcus, who had been just reckless enough to forget that some moments have consequences that do not stay neatly in the past where you left them. Oh, he said softly. Yes, Valia confirmed. Marcus rubbed his face with both hands. It didn't reorganize reality into anything more manageable, but it felt like it should have. Okay, he said, lowering his hands. Hypothetically, if someone had made a culturally, enthusiastic mistake several months ago, wouldn't there have been some kind of notification system? Valia tilted her head slightly. You were notified. I was not, Marcus said immediately. You were invited to remain for an extended stay, she replied. Marcus stared at her. I thought that was politeness. You know, stay as long as you like, which, universally, means please leave at your earliest convenience. That is not how it is interpreted here. Marcus let out a slow breath. Of course it isn't. Valia studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable but not unkind. You are not under arrest, she said. That is genuinely reassuring, Marcus replied, because this feels exactly like the opening of an arrest. You are, however, not permitted to depart, she continued. There it is, Marcus muttered. Until matters of paternity and intent are properly established, Valia finished. Marcus looked at her, then at his ship, then back at her. Intent, he repeated. I assume that's the part where I explain, quite convincingly, that I did not plan this. That will be part of it, Valia said. He hesitated, and the other part. Valia's gaze softened just slightly, just enough to be noticed. Determining what you will do now, she said. Marcus let that settle. The weight of it pressed in quietly but firmly. This wasn't a trap. It wasn't an accusation. It was something far more complicated than either of those things and far more real. He looked down at his small travel case, sitting beside him on the floor, and felt suddenly, absurdly unprepared. Well, he said at last, managing a faint smile. I suppose canceling my departure is going to require considerably more paperwork than I expected. The corner of Valia's lips curved, just barely. Consider it your most important delivery. Marcus sighed, glancing once more at the ship that was no longer his exit. Next time, he said, I am absolutely choosing assignments with fewer long-term consequences. There will not be a next time like this, Valia said. Marcus nodded slowly. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. Marcus discovered very quickly that not being under arrest, and not being allowed to leave were, in practice almost, identical experiences. The main difference was the furniture. The suite they assigned him was generous by any standard. It overlooked a vast inner courtyard where alien plants shimmered in slow, shifting colors, responding to frequencies that Marcus could not hear and did not understand. It was beautiful in the way that only deeply foreign things can be, genuinely lovely, and entirely useless to a man whose entire life had just been redirected by a single sentence. Marcus stood in the center of the room and turned in a slow circle, as if an exit strategy might reveal itself if he rotated through enough angles. It did not. He set his travel case down with the careful resignation of a person acknowledging a temporary, though possibly longer than temporary, defeat. "All right," he muttered. "Step 1, do not panic. Step 2, figure out what intent means before someone appears with a document labeled lifelong responsibility." The door chimed softly. Marcus turned toward it. "If that's the part where someone says good news, it was all a misunderstanding. I'm emotionally available for that." The door opened. It was not that part. 3 individuals entered. 2 of them wore the unmistakable attire of scientists, and the third carried a tablet that looked far too official to bring anything comfortable in its wake. Their movements were precise. Their expressions were neutral in the specific way that suggested all important decisions had already been made somewhere else. "Marcus Hale," the one with the tablet said. "That's me," Marcus replied. "Still me, very much hoping to remain just me." "We are here to initiate verification protocols," the scientist continued. Marcus crossed his arms lightly. "Verification sounds harmless enough. I verify things all the time. Messages, coordinates, occasionally my own sanity." "This concerns biological confirmation," the second scientist added. Marcus paused. "Ah," he said, "the glowing blue test." All 3 looked at him. "That was a joke," Marcus clarified. "Mostly." "It is not entirely inaccurate," the tablet holder admitted. Marcus let out a short, slightly strained laugh. "Of course it isn't." They gestured toward a device that had silently extended from the wall. Its surface was alive with faint pulses of soft light. It resembled something between sophisticated medical equipment and something that might also, in a secondary function, evaluate your life choices. "Place your hand here," one of them instructed. Marcus stepped closer, studying the device. "Quick question before I do, this won't absorb my memories, will it? Or assign me a secondary profession I didn't apply for?" "It will not," the scientist replied. "Excellent," Marcus said, placing his hand on the surface, "because I am currently significantly overbooked." The device hummed, a low, resonant vibration that traveled up his arm and seemed to settle somewhere deep in his chest. Patterns of light shifted beneath his skin, as though something was mapping him at a level far beyond ordinary biology. Marcus watched it happen, fascinated despite himself. "You know," he said, "on Earth this process usually involves a swab and an awkward silence. This method is considerably more atmospheric." "It is more efficient," the tablet holder replied. "I'm sure it is," Marcus agreed. "Also significantly more intimidating." The hum deepened briefly, then faded. The device retracted as smoothly as it had appeared, leaving Marcus standing with both hands slightly raised, unsure whether to trust the sudden absence of sensation. "That's it?" he asked. "For now," the scientist said. Marcus lowered his hands slowly. "I was expecting more dramatic lighting." "There will be a full resonance analysis," the second scientist explained. "Results will require time." Marcus nodded. "Time I apparently have in considerable abundance." They moved to leave. Marcus raised one hand. "Wait, one more question." They paused. "Hypothetically," he said, choosing each word carefully, "if the results confirm what we are all strongly suspecting, what happens next?" The 3 exchanged a brief glance. "Discussions of responsibility and parental rights will proceed," the tablet holder said. Marcus managed a small smile. "That sounds like a conversation I should definitely bring snacks to." "It is considered a serious matter," the scientist replied. "I gathered that," Marcus said. "I just tend to perform better when I'm not actively terrified." There was a moment of silence, less heavy than before, but still full of everything unspoken. Then they left. Marcus stood alone in the quiet suite, the stillness settling around him like something physical. He exhaled slowly and ran a hand through his hair. "Verification protocols," he muttered. "Wonderful. I assume existential crisis protocols are scheduled for directly after." The door chimed again. Marcus looked up. "If this is about my intent, I'd like to formally declare that I intend to understand what is happening before I allow myself to panic." The door opened. Valia stepped inside. Marcus straightened automatically, then made himself relax. "Your Majesty," he said, "please tell me you've come with simpler explanations than the scientists brought." Valia regarded him quietly for a moment, then walked further into the room. "I wish to see how you were adjusting." Marcus considered the word. "Define adjusting," he said, "because if it means accepting that my departure has been indefinitely postponed due to unexpected parenthood, I'd say I am progressing at a pace best described as cautious disbelief." The faintest curve touched Valia's lips. "That is a reasonable response." Marcus leaned back against the edge of the table. "I keep thinking there must be a version of this where I wake up and realize it was all a very vivid nightmare caused by alien festival drinks." "There is not," Valia replied. "Worth checking," Marcus said. She studied him again, this time with a quiet, more careful attention. "You are not angry," she observed. Marcus shrugged slightly. "Confused, yes. Overwhelmed, absolutely. But angry?" He paused. "No, you didn't hide it from me. You told me directly." Valia inclined her head. "You deserved that." Marcus met her eyes. "And now?" "Now," Valia said, "we wait for confirmation, and then we decide." Marcus nodded slowly, letting the weight of that settle into something real. "Well," he said after a moment, "I suppose I should start getting used to the idea that my schedule has changed rather dramatically." Valia's expression softened just enough to be visible, just enough to matter. "Yes," she said, "it has." If you are enjoying this story so far, I would love to know your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever been in a situation where life surprised you completely, where something you never planned turned out to change everything? Share your story with us. You are among friends here. Time, Marcus discovered, behaved in a very particular way when you were waiting to find out whether you were about to become a father in the middle of an alien empire. It stretched in the wrong directions. It slowed during the moments he most needed it to move, and it accelerated precisely whenever he tried to stop thinking. He had been inside the palace for 3 days, or 4, possibly 6. The clocks on this world did not follow Earth logic, and the polite assistant who had attempted to explain the local timekeeping system had quietly given up halfway through the explanation when Marcus asked whether there was a version that included hours, minutes, and something resembling emotional predictability. There was not, so Marcus adapted, poorly but with commitment. He stood now in a long, open corridor that overlooked the inner gardens, wide and luminous, filled with plants that responded to sound. Every time a voice carried through the space, the leaves shimmered faintly, like they were quietly paying attention to the conversation. "I feel like I'm being evaluated by vegetation," Marcus muttered. "They are not evaluating you," came a calm voice behind him. Marcus didn't jump. He had made a conscious decision several days ago to stop jumping. Jumping attracted attention, attention led to conversations, and conversations in this palace had a tendency to contain life-altering information. He turned slowly. Valia approached, her steps measured and unhurried, her presence as composed as the rest of this world seemed to be. The soft light caught the elegant curve of her long ears. She looked, he thought, like someone who had been carrying a great deal of thought and managing it with practiced dignity. "Are you certain?" Marcus asked, gesturing toward the plants. "Because that one definitely responded when I said something embarrassing earlier." "It reacts to sound frequency," Valia replied, "not content." Marcus nodded. "Good, that means it didn't understand me. That's an enormous relief." Valia stopped beside him. Her gaze moved briefly toward the garden, then returned. "You are restless." "That is an extremely polite way of saying I have walked this same corridor 14 times, Marcus said. "I counted, then lost count and started over. Very productive morning." "You could request activities," she suggested. "I did," Marcus replied. Your advisor offered me a cultural lecture that lasted 2 hours and included an extremely detailed explanation of ceremonial footwear traditions. Valia's expression shifted slightly. It is an important topic. I have no doubt, Marcus said, but I am currently trying to process the concept of unexpected fatherhood. Formal shoe history felt like a secondary concern. Silence settled between them, softer than before. Valia glanced at him again. You are handling this better than I expected. Marcus let out a quiet, genuine laugh. That's because I've reached the phase where my brain has accepted that panicking won't change anything. It tried. It panicked thoroughly. Then it got tired of panicking and moved on. And before that, she asked. Before that, Marcus admitted, there was definitely a phase where I seriously considered retreating to my ship, sealing the door, and pretending none of this was real. He paused. But your guards appear to be extremely committed to their responsibilities. They are, Valia confirmed. Marcus tilted his head slightly. You knew I wouldn't leave. Her gaze met his steadily. I knew you would not run. That's a very generous assumption, Marcus said. It is an observation, she replied. Marcus looked back at the garden, considering that. You don't seem particularly surprised by any of this, he said after a moment. Valia was quiet before answering. I am not unfamiliar with responsibility arriving without warning. Marcus glanced at her. That sounds like experience speaking. It is, she said simply. He shifted his weight slightly, folding his arms in a loose, thoughtful way. Are you worried? Valia did not answer immediately. When she did, the word came simply, without careful framing or diplomatic precision. Yes, she said. It was the first time she had offered something so unguarded. Just a simple, honest word. Marcus nodded slowly. Good, he said. Valia blinked once. Good. Yes, Marcus replied. Because if you weren't worried, I would be significantly more concerned. That earned him something close to a smile, faint, almost reluctant, but genuinely there. I have concerns, she said. So do I, Marcus replied. For example, I still don't know whether your parenting traditions include anything I should be specifically warned about. Do children here develop faster than on Earth? Slower? Do they, I don't know, begin issuing formal royal decrees at age 3? Valia's eyes held the trace of quiet amusement. They do not. Excellent, Marcus said, because I was not prepared to negotiate with a toddler. They require guidance, she added. Marcus nodded. That sounds familiar. Humans require guidance too. Most of us simply choose to ignore it for as long as possible. Valia studied him again, her gaze lingering a moment longer than before. You speak as if you are already considering this, she said. Marcus exhaled quietly. It's difficult not to, he admitted. Every time I try to think about leaving, it feels, he hesitated. Unresolved, Valia offered. Exactly that, Marcus said. Like walking away from something I haven't fully understood yet. Valia's expression softened again, in that subtle way she had, the way that changed the whole quality of her face without changing any single feature you could point to. The results will come soon, she said. Marcus nodded. I know. And when they do, she continued, you will have a choice. Marcus looked at her. Really looked, this time, not at the queen, not at the complexity of the situation, but at a person standing in the same uncertainty he was. Choices are interesting things, he said quietly. Everyone talks about them as though they're straightforward, but most of the time they're just different varieties of complicated. Valia inclined her head. That is true. Marcus glanced back at the garden, where a faint shimmer moved through the leaves as a distant voice carried through the air. Well, he said, at least I won't be making this one entirely alone. Valia did not respond immediately, but she did not look away either. No, she said after a moment, you will not. Marcus nodded, a small, steady movement. Good, he said, because I am going to need someone to explain the ceremonial footwear situation again at some point if I'm going to be here for a while. Valia's lips curved just enough to be seen. I will ensure a considerably shorter explanation. Marcus let out a quiet breath, and something in his shoulders eased, truly eased, for the first time since the docking bay. Thank you, he said. And for once, the waiting didn't feel quite so heavy. The summons came without warning. which Marcus was beginning to understand was not an oversight on anyone's part, but simply the preferred cultural approach. One moment he was standing before a wall display that rearranged itself every time he blinked, apparently also a feature, not a malfunction. And the next, the door chimed with the unmistakable tone of official inevitability. Marcus did not move immediately. He stood very still and looked at the door. The door, in return, remained closed with complete confidence. "This is it," he murmured. "This is the moment where everything becomes significantly more complicated." The chime sounded again, with just a shade more insistence. Marcus exhaled, straightened his posture the way a person does when they are bracing for consequences, and stepped forward. "Come in," he said, preparing himself for either scientists' paperwork or some combination of the two. It was both. 3 officials entered, accompanied by the scientist he had met before, the one who carried the crystalline tablet. It pulsed now with a slow, soft internal light, as if something important had been loaded into it. Marcus pointed at it. "That's glowing," he said. "I'm not saying that's suspicious, but it is absolutely not comforting." "It is the result matrix," the official replied. "Of course it is," Marcus said. Valia entered behind them. Her presence was quiet but unmistakable in the way that her presence always was. The room shifted when she stepped into it. Not because of authority, though she carried that naturally. It was something else. A focus. A settling. Marcus noticed the quality of her expression, composed as always. But underneath that composure, something he hadn't seen in quite that form before. Expectation. He stepped back slightly to give her room and glanced at the assembled group. Should I sit, stand, or dramatically brace myself against something for support? "Standing is sufficient," one of the scientists said. "Good," Marcus replied. "Less risk of falling over from shock." The crystalline panel was placed on a flat central surface, and the room dimmed subtly, as if the environment itself had decided to mark the moment. Lines of light began to move across the panel's surface, forming patterns that Marcus absolutely could not interpret. He leaned slightly toward the nearest scientist. "Quick question, is there a version of this where someone simply says the result in ordinary words?" "There is," the scientist replied. Marcus relaxed a fraction. "I vote for that version." The patterns intensified, converging slowly toward a single concentrated point of bright, clear blue light. Marcus stared at it. "That is very blue," he said quietly. "Yes," the scientist confirmed. "And blue means?" The scientist paused, appearing mildly surprised that the question still needed answering. "It confirms genetic alignment." Marcus blinked once. "That is an extremely official way of saying yes," Valia said softly. Marcus let out a slow breath. His shoulders dropped just slightly, not in defeat, but in the particular way of a person who has been holding tension they weren't fully aware of. He looked at the glowing panel, then at Valia, then back at the panel. "Well," he said after a moment, "at least it didn't explode. I was genuinely concerned about that possibility." No one spoke. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck. "Right, probably not the right moment for humor. I apologize." Valia's gaze remained on him, steady but not cold. "It is acceptable," she said. "Good," Marcus replied, "because I'm going to need it." The officials began quietly documenting the results, their movements efficient and practiced. For them, this was procedure, a process they had navigated before, one with established steps and established outcomes. For Marcus, it was a turning point, the kind that divides time into before and after. He looked down at his own hands, flexing his fingers slightly, half expecting them to feel different in some way he couldn't name. "They don't feel like father hands," he murmured. "They are still your hands," Valia said. Marcus looked at her. "That's reassuring. I wasn't prepared for a sudden physical transformation." A faint trace of amusement passed through her expression, brief but real. The tablet holder stepped forward. "With confirmation now established, proceedings regarding parental intent and legal positioning will begin." Marcus raised a hand. "Proceedings sounds intense." "It is a formal process," the official replied. "Of course it is," Marcus said. "Everything here is wonderfully formal." He tilted his head. "What are my options exactly?" "There are options available," the official confirmed. You may choose to remain and participate in co-parenting under a defined arrangement, or you may fulfill certain obligations and depart under specific conditions. Marcus looked at him. Specific conditions sounds like something that comes with a great deal of fine print. There is documentation, the official confirmed. Marcus sighed, naturally. Valia stepped closer then. The officials receded in significance, not physically, but in the way that everything peripheral does when something truly important moves to the center. You are not bound, she said, her attention fully on Marcus. You will decide. Marcus met her gaze and searched it carefully, for pressure, for hidden expectation, for any thread of influence pulling him in one direction. He found none, just the same honest directness she had offered since the very beginning. That almost makes it harder, he said quietly. Valia tilted her head. Why? Because if I were forced, Marcus replied, I could blame the situation, but if I choose, he hesitated, then let out a small breath. Then it belongs to me. Valia held his gaze. Yes. Marcus absorbed that slowly. The room felt quieter now, even with the officials present. He looked once more at the glowing blue result, still pulsing faintly on the panel. So, he said, this is real. It is, Valia said. He let out a small, almost disbelieving laugh. I came here to deliver a message, he said, and now I am part of one. Something in Valia's expression shifted, just slightly, less guarded than before, less precisely composed, just present. Marcus straightened, he looked between her and the officials. All right, he said, what happens next? The tablet holder stepped forward, ready to explain procedures and timelines. But Marcus' attention stayed on Valia, because for the first time this didn't feel like waiting for instructions. It felt like the beginning of a choice. If this moment resonates with you, if you've ever stood at a crossroads where choosing something real felt terrifying and right at the same time, press like on this video. And share it with someone who would understand this kind of story. You never know who needs to hear it today. Marcus had expected many things to follow the confirmation. Long formal speeches, certainly. Complicated legal documentation, without question. Possibly a ceremonial robe he would be offered and quietly refuse to wear. What he had not expected was to be invited into a discussion about nursery designs. He stood in a wide, luminous chamber filled with floating projections, each one displaying a different interpretation of what could only be described as the most sophisticated and ambitious infant environment in the galaxy. One projection showed a softly glowing room with adjustable gravity fields. Another featured a cradle that hovered gently off the floor, rotating at a carefully calculated angle to optimize what the accompanying text described as developmental orientation, whatever that meant. A third projection appeared to be a structure that bore a remarkable resemblance to a small, elegant fortress. Marcus pointed at it. Why does that one look like it could survive a military conflict? It can, one of the advisors replied. Marcus blinked slowly. Of course it can. Valia stood beside him, arms loosely folded, observing the projections with the composed focus of someone who had governed an empire for years and was now being asked to choose between 16 variations of ambient lighting temperature. The child does not require defensive architecture, she said. The advisor inclined his head. It is a precautionary option. Marcus nodded. I think your definition of precaution and mine exist in very different categories. Valia glanced at him. Explain. My version involves soft corners and a good blanket, Marcus said. Not a miniature fortress with shield generators. It is a modest shield, the advisor added. Marcus let out a quiet breath. That sentence worries me more than it probably should. The projections shifted and rearranged themselves as if trying to make a better impression. Marcus moved toward one that had settled into a simpler, quieter design. Soft, balanced colors, stable surfaces, nothing that appeared to have a secondary defense function. This one, he said, this looks like something a person could actually exist in peacefully. Valia studied it. Define peacefully. Marcus considered, less likely to accidentally initiate anything. She looked at it for another moment, then gave a small nod. Acceptable. The advisors immediately began adjusting parameters, their hands moving through the air as though shaping something that had not yet solidified into reality. Marcus watched them for a moment, then leaned slightly toward Valia. "I didn't expect to be involved in this part," he admitted. "You are involved," she said. Marcus offered a faint smile. "I'm beginning to notice." They walked together through the chamber, the conversation shifting gradually from projections and designs to more practical matters: medical care, developmental timelines, educational systems that sounded considerably more advanced than anything Marcus had grown up with. "At what age does formal learning begin?" he asked. "Early," Valia replied. "Cognitive development is encouraged from the very beginning." Marcus nodded. "Same on Earth, though we usually start with simpler things, basic colors, shapes, identifying sounds, not interstellar diplomacy." "That comes later," she said. "Good," Marcus replied. "I'd like to be at least somewhat prepared before I'm expected to help with homework that involves negotiating trade agreements between star systems." Valia's lips curved very slightly. They paused near a display that laid out a timeline of development, glowing markers indicating key stages, each one labeled with careful precision. Marcus studied it in silence, his expression more serious now. "This is real," he said, quietly and almost to himself. Valia did not reply immediately. "It has been real," she said after a moment. Marcus nodded. "I know, I'm just catching up." The silence that followed was grounded rather than heavy. One of the advisors approached carefully. "There is also the matter of designation," he said. Marcus turned. "Designation." "The child's official status," the advisor clarified. "Titles, lineage, formal acknowledgement." Marcus raised a hand. "Right, important things, yes." Valia stepped forward slightly. "That discussion will occur separately." The advisor inclined his head and stepped back without protest. Marcus watched him go, then looked at Valia. "That sounded like a conversation with layers." "It will have them," she said. Marcus exhaled softly. "Good thing I'm getting practice with complicated conversations." They continued walking, slower now, in the quiet companionship of two people trying to think through the same enormous thing from different angles. "I keep expecting this to feel wrong," Marcus admitted. "Like I don't belong in any of this." Valia looked at him. "And does it?" Marcus thought honestly about the question. "A little," he said, "but less than before." Valia nodded once, a small, deliberate motion, as if that answer had mattered. Marcus gestured toward the projections again, still softly rotating around them. "You know, back home, the big debates are usually about wall colors and which toys are developmentally appropriate, not gravitational stability." "You may still debate colors," Valia said. Marcus smiled faintly. "Good, I have strong opinions about colors." "I have noticed," she replied. He glanced at her. "That sounded like there's a story there." "You disagreed with the ceremonial banners," she said. Marcus laughed, a small, genuine sound. "They were too symmetrical." "They were intentionally symmetrical." "That was exactly my concern," Marcus said. Valia shook her head slightly. It was a small movement, subtle but unmistakably and wonderfully amused. They stopped again near a projection that had settled into a balanced, unassuming design. Neither overly complex nor overly bare. Something that could actually hold a life without overwhelming it. Marcus looked at it, then at her. "This one feels right." Valia studied it for a long moment, then she nodded. "It does." It was a small decision, in the context of everything happening around them. A single choice among many that still needed to be made. But it felt significant, the way that shared decisions often do, not because of their size, but because of what they signal. Marcus stood with his arms loosely crossed, his gaze resting on the projection. "I didn't plan any of this," he said. "Nor did I," Valia replied. "But here we are." Valia's eyes remained on the projection, but her voice carried something softer than it usually held. "Yes." Marcus looked at her, then at the quiet shape of the future they were slowly beginning to build. "Well," he said, "if we're going to do this, we might as well do it properly." Valia turned her head just enough to meet his gaze. "We will," she said. And for the first time, Marcus did not feel like a visitor. Marcus had learned a great many things during his time in the palace. He had learned how to navigate corridors that subtly rearranged their layout, apparently as a feature. He had learned that alien advisors approached nursery design with a seriousness that most governments reserved for international treaties. He had learned that the plants in the inner garden responded to human speech with what felt unnerving, like genuine interest. And he had learned, most importantly, that thinking alone for too long was a genuinely dangerous activity. He was currently doing exactly that. He stood on one of the upper terraces, looking out over the vast city that stretched far beyond the palace walls. Lights moved in layered, shifting patterns across the skyline. Structures hovered slowly in the distance, drifting like slow, quiet thoughts that hadn't settled yet. It was beautiful in a way that made everything feel immense and made his situation feel very, very real. Marcus leaned against the railing, exhaled, and began organizing his thoughts aloud. "All right," he muttered. "Let's walk through this carefully." He raised one finger. Option 1, leave, return to a normal life. Tell myself this was an unusually complicated assignment and move on. He lowered the finger. Option 2, stay. Become part of something I categorically did not plan for, which also involves learning alien parenting customs, navigating foreign legal structures, and apparently developing opinions about ceremonial footwear. He paused, staring at the city below. Neither of these options came with a guidebook. That seems genuinely unfair. You are speaking to yourself again. Marcus didn't turn immediately. He had learned to recognize Valia's presence before she announced it. There was a particular quality to the air around her, a way the space seemed to settle. "Only when I need truly intelligent conversation," he replied. "It's been very productive so far." Valia stepped beside him, her gaze moving out over the city. "And what conclusions have you reached?" Marcus considered that honestly. "That I am quite skilled at identifying problems," he said, "considerably less skilled at resolving them." "That is a common condition," she replied. "Good," Marcus said. "I was starting to worry it was specific to me." Silence moved between them, easy this time and necessary. Valia spoke first. "You are uncertain." Marcus let out a slow breath. "That is a very diplomatic way of saying I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing." "Do you believe anyone truly does?" she asked. Marcus thought about it, then shook his head. "No, but most people are better at performing certainty. It's convincing from a distance." Valia's lips moved in that quiet, barely their way that she had. "That is also a common condition." Marcus glanced at her, then back at the city. "I keep thinking about leaving," he admitted. "Not because I want to disappear, just because it was what I was supposed to do. It was the plan." Valia did not interrupt. "It's clean," Marcus continued. "I finish the assignment, I go home, life continues. That's how this kind of thing is supposed to work." He paused. "And now?" "And now," she said. "Now it doesn't feel simple anymore." He turned slightly, facing her more directly. "I didn't expect to care this much about something I didn't choose." Valia held his gaze. Her expression had shifted from the careful composure she wore most of the time into something more honest. "Care is not dependent on having planned something," she said. Marcus let out a short, quiet laugh. "That would have been useful to know considerably earlier." "You would not have believed it," she replied. "That's fair," Marcus admitted. The city lights moved gently below them. Their shifting reflections caught faintly in the air between the two of them. "I do not expect you to stay," Valia said. Quietly. Marcus looked at her. "You don't." "No," she said. "I expect you to choose." He studied her carefully, searching for any layer of pressure, any shape of expectation hidden beneath the words. There was none. There never was with her. "That's a great deal of trust," he said. "It is not trust," she replied. "It is respect." Marcus exhaled slowly, the weight of that landing somewhere deeper than anything else she had said today. "I'm afraid," he admitted. Valia did not look away. "Of what?" Marcus ran a hand through his hair. "Of making the wrong decision, of staying and discovering I'm not enough, of leaving and spending years wondering what I walked away from." Valia listened without interruption, her posture steady and open. "That is not one fear," she said after a moment. "That is many." Marcus let out a small laugh. "I like to be thorough." Her expression softened again. "Fear does not mean you are unprepared," she said. "It means you understand what is actually in front of you." Marcus shook his head slightly. "It feels like the same thing." It is not, she said. He looked at her, really looked. And you, he asked, are you afraid? Valia paused. Yes, she said. Marcus nodded slowly. Good, that makes two of us. A very faint smile touched the edges of her expression. Marcus turned back toward the view, resting his hands loosely on the railing. You know, he said, when I first arrived here, I was just trying to complete a delivery without accidentally offending anyone. You succeeded, Valia said. Marcus glanced at her. I'm not entirely sure about that. You did not offend me, she said. That's because you didn't know what was coming, Marcus replied. Valia almost laughed. The moment lingered light and unexpectedly warm. Marcus straightened slightly. His expression shifted, not yet resolved, not yet certain, but something had changed. Something had settled. I don't have an answer yet, he said. I know, Valia replied. But I think, he said, hesitating for just a moment before continuing, I think I'm beginning to understand what the question actually is. Valia inclined her head slightly. That is a beginning. Marcus looked out at the city. Yeah, he said quietly, it is. And for the first time, the future didn't feel like something he was trying to outrun. It felt like something he was slowly, carefully learning how to move toward. Marcus stood once again in the docking bay, the place where all of this had begun and where it was possibly about to end. Or not end. He hadn't decided yet, which was, of course, the entire problem. The ship was ready, systems active, clearance approved. Every indicator told the same story. Departure was not only possible but expected. That, he thought, was exactly the problem. He looked at the open ramp, then down at the small travel case in his hand. It felt lighter than it should have. Nothing inside it had changed. What had changed was everything surrounding it. You have delayed your departure 3 times. Marcus didn't turn immediately. I like to be consistent, he said. If I'm going to hesitate, I commit to it fully. Valia stepped closer, her presence steady and now, in some way he couldn't quite name, familiar. The light of the bay traced the edges of her long ears. Her expression was composed, but no longer distant. Not with him, not anymore. The transport window will not remain open indefinitely, she said. Marcus nodded. Space travel has very little patience for indecision. I've noticed that. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything that had already been said and everything that did not need to be repeated. Marcus turned and faced her fully. I've been thinking, he said. I am aware, Valia replied. He smiled faintly. Of course you are. He took a breath, slow and deliberate, like releasing something he had been holding onto for a very long time. When I arrived here, he began, I had a plan. Deliver the message, stay out of trouble, leave on schedule, simple. He glanced briefly at the ship, then back at her. It turns out I am not nearly as good at simple as I believed. Valia watched him quietly. I kept telling myself I could go back, Marcus continued. Back to what I understand, back to what I planned. But every time I tried to picture that, actually picture it, it felt incomplete. Like I'd be returning to a version of my life that no longer quite fit. He loosened his grip on the travel case. I thought staying meant giving something up, he said, but it doesn't feel like that, not anymore. Valia's gaze softened just slightly. What does it feel like? She asked. Marcus met her eyes. It feels like choosing something, he said. The words settled between them, quiet but certain, clear in the way that only honest things can be. Valia held his gaze, searching not for hesitation but for the truth beneath the words. You understand what that choice requires, she said. Marcus nodded. Yes, responsibility, uncertainty, probably several more conversations about advanced nursery technology that I didn't know I needed to have opinions about. That is likely, she admitted. Marcus smiled. I'm still not agreeing to the fortress crib. It remains available as a last resort, she said. Let's agree to consider it a last resort, Marcus replied. The warmth of the exchange eased something in the room, not solving the weight of what was happening, but making it bearable in the way that shared moments do. Marcus looked down at the travel case in his hand. Then, without hesitation this time, he set it down on the floor beside him. The sound it made was soft, but it was final. Valia's eyes followed the movement. You are staying, she said. Marcus nodded once. Yes, not because I was forced to, not because I felt obligated, chosen deliberately. He paused. I don't know exactly what I'm doing, he added. I'm almost certainly going to make mistakes, probably a lot of them. That is expected, Valia said. Marcus let out a small, relieved breath. Good, because I would hate to disappoint you this early. Valia stepped closer, closing the space between them in a way that no longer carried any formality. You will not face it alone, she said. Marcus looked at her, and for the first time the full weight of everything ahead didn't feel overwhelming. It felt shared, carried between two people who hadn't planned any of this and who were choosing it anyway. That helps, he said quietly, more than you know. Behind them, the ship emitted a soft, final tone, a last indication that departure was still available, a door still open. Marcus looked back at it. Then he turned away. I suppose I should inform someone that I'm canceling my departure, he said. Is there a form for that, or is the protocol to simply walk away and trust that someone understands? There will be documentation, Valia said. Marcus nodded. Of course there will. They began walking together, away from the ship, away from the departure that had once seemed inevitable, away from the version of his future that no longer fit. After a few steps, Marcus glanced at her. So, hypothetically, how early is too early to begin learning how to be a parent in an alien empire? Valia considered the question with full seriousness. It is. Already time, she said. Marcus nodded slowly. Right, no pressure. There will be pressure, she added. Marcus smiled, quiet and genuine. I figured. They continued forward. The vast corridors of the palace opened before them, not unfamiliar anymore, not foreign, something that was beginning slowly to feel like a place he belonged. Marcus exhaled, steady and more grounded than he had felt in days. You know, he said, this is absolutely not how I expected this mission to end. Valia glanced at him. Is that a regret? Marcus thought about it, took a real moment to consider it honestly. No, he said. And this time there was no hesitation at all. And that, my dear friends, is where we leave Marcus today, standing not at a doorway out, but at the beginning of something unexpected, something unplanned, and something that turned out to be exactly where he needed to be. What do you think will happen next? How do you think Marcus,